The Australian Capital Territory has a population that's approaching Tasmania's. It's the wealthiest region in Australia per capita. It's produced multiple Australian internationals, and it has a concentrated, centralised population including powerful politicians. Above all, it hosts the capital city of Australia. So how come the ACT isn't really represented in top-level men's domestic cricket? As it stands, the ACT has equal status to the states in underage cricket, with sides competing in the national championships all the way up to under-19 level. In women's cricket, they have a side competing in the WNCL, the top level of women's one-day cricket in Australia. However, they have no teams in the men's or women's BBL, the Sheffield Shield, and they only played a few seasons in the One-Day Cup almost 3 decades ago. The ACT representative side plays in the state second 11 competition, though at times they have been forced to share this team with country New South Wales. And most of their best homegrown players don't even play for this team. They're instead dotted around the country in any number of state sides. It begs the question, why are they not afforded the same treatment as the smaller states? So the stark reality is that the ACT is still less populous than any of the states, and compared to most of them, by a long way. At a touch under 500,000, the ACT is close to Tasmania's 600,000, but compared to Victoria's 7 million and New South Wales' 8.5 million, there is a big disparity there. But more than that, the ACT's population growth is relatively recent. Now that sort of comes with the territory when you designate an imaginary city as the capital of a country in the 20th century. The last time the Sheffield Shield was expanded to include Tasmania, the ACT's population was only about 200,000. Now there's also the boring governance reasons. 4 of the 6 state cricket boards would have to approve any expansion of these competitions, and you'd have to consider how this complicates the process. The ACT also doesn't have a particularly distinct culture that might get people to stringently demand a team like this, though obviously as time has gone on, one has kind of developed. And the ACT does have an ingrained cricket culture that's been strengthened by matches such as the Prime Minister's 11 that bring top-level cricket to the capital every year. Among the biggest issues in bringing another team into domestic cricket competitions in Australia would be that it would take the number of state teams to 7 and BBL teams to 9. Now, in the One-Day Cup, you could work around it, and there have been 7 teams in the competition in 3 separate iterations. Firstly, right from the outset, when New Zealand was involved in the competition, during which time they won the whole thing 3 times. Secondly, when the ACT was actually in the competition as the Canberra Comets in the late 90s. And thirdly, when a composite team of fringe contracted state players called the Cricket Australia 11 was in the competition through the 2010s. Having a Canberra BBL team would be even easier because you could deal with a wonky fixture or easily bring in another team from a city like the Gold Coast, Newcastle, Wollongong, or some other city to even it up. But in the Sheffield Shield, firstly, each team would either have to play 2 more games a season or deal with a potentially unfair fixture where they play some teams once and other teams twice. But even worse, one team every round would have to play a bye. And in an already tight schedule, it would be a real problem. Now, this could be remedied by adding yet another team alongside the ACT to the Sheffield Shield, but there are basically no good candidates to join them. Now, the simple option would be the Northern Territory, but that's an incredibly fraught prospect for a range of reasons that I may touch on one day. Adding a second team from any state would significantly diminish the reputation and standing of the competition and would probably be farcical really, as would adding a representative side like an Australian under-21s or under-23s. Another big factor that you see in a lot of Australian sports as a reason to not have expansion is the idea that it would introduce talent dilution. Now, I don't really agree with this point, but this is what would be argued. As it stands, we currently have 2 states, Tasmania and South Australia, which cannot produce enough state-level cricketers on their own to fill out a squad or even an 11. without relying on imports from other states, that is. The current Tasmania squad of 25 players has only 7 players who are actually developed in the state. Presumably, the ACT would be the exact same, and so the quality of the competition would decrease. I think there is some element of truth in this. That said, there are plenty of players who were deemed not good enough for their original state, who moved to a lesser state to get opportunities and then became a very good player. Look no further than Jackson Bird and Nathan Ellis, both players from New South Wales who couldn't get a look in at the state team, moved to Tasmania in their mid-20s and have forged great domestic careers and earned international honours. Not to mention, Tasmania and South Australia may not produce players en masse, but they do produce good players. Are players like Bo Webster, Alex Carey and Travis Head as good as they are now if they don't come from states that have domestic cricket teams? And let's not pretend that one of these states that is full of reject players from other states didn't just win the Sheffield Shield. But at the end of the day, part of the reason why CA are probably pretty content with the ACT not having a team is because the best players from the ACT and the capital region more broadly will just move to another state for a chance or play for New South Wales. And these states actively recruit these players too. Being from Canberra or the capital region didn't stop Michael Bevan or Brad Haddin from long distinguished international careers. Jason Behrendorff moved to WA after growing up in and playing for the ACT at underage level. Nathan Lyon played representative cricket for the ACT from under 17 level to the senior level and got his chance at South Australia and then later New South Wales. So the chances are that if a state quality player gets produced by the ACT, the fact that the ACT doesn't have a Shield team isn't necessarily a barrier to becoming a state player. I wouldn't be astonished, for instance, if in coming years the current rising star of ACT cricket, Zach Keogh, earns a contract at another state. As stated earlier, there would be concerns about the competitiveness of an ACT team as well. Now, it's hard to tell exactly what an ACT team would look like, but if you consider the capital region players more broadly, I actually think the ACT could produce squads with more local players than Tasmania. And it would be easier for Canberra to attract talent from New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland than just about anywhere else in the country. But we also have the cold hard truth that from 1997 to 2000, the ACT were in the One Day Cup. But even with import players from other states like Merv Hughes, Mike Valletta, Anthony Stewart and Rod Tucker, they could only muster 3 wins across 3 entire seasons and were booted out after a winless final year in the competition. That said, I do think that it's realistic that Canberra may one day have a BBL team. Canberra is already a fair bit bigger than Hobart, which has a team, and the city-based nature of the Big Bash obviously lends itself to the ACT getting a team. The population of the ACT is also growing pretty quickly, and will probably overtake Tasmania within the next few decades. But Tasmania has institutional power in cricket that the ACT just doesn't have. The glory days of the Canberra Comets may yet take a while to return.